Hark, it's the 87th Precinct podcast, and we've reached the swinging 60s in our examination of the books of Ed McBain in his 87th Precinct series. We are up to book number 11, so between 1956 and 1960 he's produced 10 books in this series. We hit 1960, a year in which he produces 3 books. Then his rate slows down a little bit after that, so the years will start flying by as we explore it. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Morgan Brown.
Hello there.
Mr. Stephen Royston.
Hello.
And we're going to get stuck into an amazing book with an amazing title. It's one of the first of the joke titles, I'd say. And I say joke in inverted commas. But before we do, we've hit a new year. And so let's have, in fact, we hit a new decade. So let's have a little bit of our cultural connections little treat here.
Cultural connection treat.
Yeah. All right, so I think this book, the book we're going to look at, was published on the 25th of May 1960. Certainly that's when it goes in the New York Times book listings as out this week. So I was looking around and about that for things to do with like film and music. So any guesses at what was the number one track in the UK and America? I will say it is the same in both countries. So. 1960.
Pass. Don't know.
Oh, that's tough. It's are we
pre-beat boom, post rock and rollers?
Yeah, sort of like the early rock and rollers have all sort of faded off a bit. Have we got some sort of
crooner,
fairly rubbishy kind of teen idols kind of cropping up in between? Or
well, there are, but that's not necessarily
who we're looking at. No,
this is probably someone who was sort of keeping the dream alive.
All right.
ELO.
ELO in 1960.
Well, they have a song called "Keeping the Dream Alive."
That's
Oh right,
weird.
I thought no, an early ELO song.
Yellow Junior.
Oh, imagine that. Well, with the robot overlords, they could have taken Jeff Lynne back in time.
Yeah.
To release an early track.
This is very early in a podcast to drop the bombshell that Jeff Lynne from ELO is controlled or working for robotic overlords.
Well, there's no getting around it.
There's no easy way to break it, is there, I suppose?
If anything goes wrong with this recording, we'll know who's to blame.
We will.
Or if it comes back and we listen back to it, it's covered in strummed acoustic guitars and cello parts.
Hello, welcome to the 87th Precinct podcast. That's the Overlords if they were to. Anyway, no, if it's not Jeff Lynne, I really
can't think who it would be, actually.
It was the Everly Brothers with Cathy's Clown.
Smashing.
So that was number one across the world by the looks of it at this
terrific.
point. Number 2 in America at the time was Elvis Presley's Stuck on You. So Elvis was in the charts loads at that point, but he was churning out ones that you've never heard of.
Yeah, he'd been to his kind of movie career already by this point.
And he's backed by the Jordanaires at that point as well. So he's it's a different bit. It's a bit of his career that's really, I don't know. I've never heard of Stuck on You by Elvis, so I can't think what it would go like at all. And number 2 in the UK was Someone Else's Baby by Adam Faith. So he's sort of he's a similar thing, isn't he? He's a sort of actor, singer, teen idol.
Kind of brought up a bit in the image of rock and roll, but a bit more of a kind of traditional all-round entertainer, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I looked up, there was a couple of novelty numbers. There was no great sort of ludicrous novelty numbers. Number 10 in the UK chart at this point was My Old Man's a Dustman by Lonnie Donegan.
Oh, right, okay, yep.
So that had been a number 1. It's, a mad world in which My Old Man's a Dustman, this sort of novelty skiffle number.
Just connected with all those people who wore core blimey trousers out there.
Yeah.
Core blimey trousers.
Core blimey trousers. This will be absolutely fascinating to our
Lived in a
listeners
council
abroad.
flat, didn't he?
He did.
It's Lonnie Donegan's obviously a very, very important musician in the history of the development of popular music, especially in the UK. Is the way skiffle sort of made music making accessible to people by removing the sort of the need for big expensive equipment and stuff. But it's very strange to look back and think that at once the song "My Old Man's a Dustman" was number 1. But
I wonder if he was
what?
Lonnie Donegan's dad, a dustman.
You know what? I don't know.
Something to find out for next time, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll definitely do.
I think that would even stretch the internet.
Yeah.
Finding the answer to that.
But In America, the number 16 spot on the hit parade was the song Sink the Bismarck by Johnny Horton.
That sounds amazing.
Well, it's a sort of weird country song about the sinking of the Bismarck.
Oh, right. It's not a dance craze. Come on, everybody, let's sing the Bismarck.
I don't need a bit close for comfort, I think, by that point, really. But it's this ludicrous, mad sort of upbeat song about the like that sort of.
It sounds
rhythm.
great.
Yeah, I sold it very well there. Couldn't think of a single word.
It sounds like a hit.
But there was a film.
Sing, 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 sing the
Bismarck.
Bismarck.
What with a steam train?
No, it's just like a
I'm talking about
steamship.
drop a steam train out of an aeroplane onto the Bismarck.
I'll probably do it.
Perhaps that's how they sunk it.
We got very daft very early. Oh well.
Hoisted a Coronation class engine up by 5 Spitfires and dropped it on the Bismarck. But it's very strange because the film Sink the Bismarck came out that year, which is about the sinking of the Bismarck, a real historical event. But this song wasn't in the film, but I think it was commissioned because they didn't think people knew about the Bismarck. So it is a song that is basically the story of Bismarck, but in sort of jaunty country pop.
Just
To check that out.
We need a hit to raise awareness of the Bismarck before people actually.
Yeah.
Well, how bizarre.
And apparently it was done by the Blues Brothers in the sequence in Bob's Country Bunker, and it was cut out and never used in the film. So there's a Blues Brothers version out there somewhere as well.
Cool.
Which I'll have to dig up. Anyway, that's the music taken care of. The Oscar-winning film in America, the Oscar-winning film was Spartacus.
Oh, yes.
And the sort of number 2 rated film in America that year was by someone that Evan Hunter, Ed McBain, worked with, and it was Psycho, which is a fantastic film. In fact, I'll tell you what, no, Spartacus was the number 1 grossing film. The winner of the Best Picture was The Apartment, which I think is a Billy Wilder movie.
Rings a vague bell, yeah.
So I wonder what came out first, Psycho or this book?
Oh, Psycho would have been out, yeah. Well, Psycho's based on
Robert Bloch, isn't it?
Robert Bloch,
From
isn't it?
a few years earlier. Not many years earlier, I don't think, but...
So in America you've got Spartacus and Psycho, and in the UK you've got Carry On Constable and Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, the two pillars of British society.
Absolutely.
There. The Carry On films, we will always get back to them.
Yep.
And Saturday Night, Sunday Morning for your gritty kitchen sink reality.
Yeah.
So you take your pick. But also the film Strangers When We Meet was released, which is based on a book by Evan Hunter. Don't think it was a very good film. It certainly doesn't look like it was very well reviewed, but I've never seen it, so... So who were the world leaders at the time? Who was the president?
Kennedy? Or was it slightly before him?
It's not Kennedy.
Who was before Kennedy?
Are we still on Eisenhower? Or?
We are.
Oh,
We're
yes.
still old Dwight. And in the UK?
Macmillan.
Yeah. I've got, so world events.
Khrushchev would be in the Kremlin.
Yeah. And the Kremlin is relevant here because it was 1960 when Gary Powers was shot down and captured by the Russians.
They paraded him.
It was a lot of show trial stuff, wasn't it? And then that film Bridge of Spies, which is about that, is very good. It's worth a watch. Now, who won the FA Cup? The Football Association Cup.
1960.
Stevo's turned into some sort of pensive lion.
Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Blackpool, I'm going to go with.
Wolves beat Rovers 3-0. Well done, Stevo.
Wolves' golden era.
I always assume it's going to be some team that isn't doing a great deal now. I was going to say Preston North End next.
But Man City signed a 20-year-old football player called Dennis Law.
They did, from Huddersfield Town.
And it was for a record fee of £55,000.
Which Huddersfield used to buy floodlights for Leeds Road.
Excellent stuff.
True story.
Very good bit of football trivia there.
Yeah, no.
I would leave that in your hands because I have no idea about it. But yeah, it was a record fee for a transfer of a player at the time, or the sale of a player, £55,000, which is a lot of money for 1960.
It was, yeah. No, he was at the Huddersfield match a few weeks ago.
Excellent stuff.
half time on the pitch slot.
Excellent. Well, there you go. So that ties it into things that are happening. Called 1960 as well. In literature, there was the Lady Chatterley's Lover, the obscenity trial, where Penguin, I think it was, wasn't it, that were in court to try and say it wasn't an obscene publication, so it could be released. Yeah. And so everyone would get the chance to read what is actually a really boring book, and is nowhere near as bad as people think it is. No. It's all those weird things that start to happen in the 60s where one generation start to butt up against another one, with the judges saying, would you let your servants read this? And people going, servants? But that doesn't impact on the world of Ed McBain's output, necessarily.
Not so much.
Although, I'll tell you what I did find. I found a reference to certain McBain books that were on a list of books that were banned in Ireland.
Ooh.
But they were just basically, by the sounds of it, they were just banning everything. So I think there was a lot of church influence. I'll have to dig that out and have a look in a little bit. But yeah, there was a lot of banning of books, and McBain was suffering from some of those. Right, okay. So the book is Give the Boys a Great Big Hand. You can more or less make up a story from that title. This is the point at which McBain starts doing tons of fun titles.
I wonder whether he came up with the title first.
Well, let me direct you to the article from the Christian Science Monitor. I don't know what year it was. Oh, I can tell you what it was. It was from 1997. I found this online. And the title of the article is How Mystery Masters Plot Their Craft. And it starts with, Ed McBain doesn't hesitate at all when asked where he starts his novels. Right away, no hedging. Boom, he has an answer. Quote, oh, it's the title. I always start with the book's title and go from there.
All right.
So that's the answer for your query there, straight from the horse's mouth.
Brilliant. He's not going to lie to the Christian Science Monitor, is he? So.
No, definitely not. He said, each word has different resonances. The title keeps me on track. With ice, for example, we're talking about icy streets, diamonds. With nocturne, everything had to be at night. I base all that on the title.
Right.
And with a title like Give the Boys a Great Big Hand, you're doing that really literally, aren't you? As what happens in what I'm calling the pre-credits sequence, which is chapter 1, is someone finds a great big hand.
It is a big hand. This is true.
And it's just the one.
Just the one hand. Which if you had certain copies of the book, you would have known, even if you hadn't worked it out from the title, because they show it on the picture on the front.
Yeah, mine's just got a palm print, and then I don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, we'll save our book cover analysis for later.
But mine's definitely a very small hand.
A tiny hand, whereas in the book, it's a great big hand.
It is.
So it was published by Simon & Schuster as an Inner Sanctum mystery in 1960. It was being published in 1962 in the UK by a company called T V Boardman as a Bloodhound mystery, which had a cartoon bloodhound as its logo. So, Morgan, I believe you found out a few bits and pieces about T V Boardman.
I did have a little look at
I thought
TV
this might
Boardman,
be up your alley because of some of this sort of stuff they publish.
Yeah, it was interesting stuff. They seem to have played a great part in bringing a lot of the kind of the more fun side of kind of American kind of pop and pulp culture to the UK. Thomas Volney Boardman.
That's a good name.
Indeed, yeah. I think sort of discovered a sort of appetite for that kind of thing during the Second World War. So definitely at that stage began a company to reprint certain US comics titles and also to make UK titles based around the style of those. So things like Super Funnies and Mystery Comics were...
I wonder if that was because a lot of that stuff was coming over with the American troops.
You can imagine that would be the case. So that would have created the appetite, and then just to have a legitimate way of getting them. I guess probably also beginning the kind of tradition that still carries on now. I mean, I guess me and they both would have read reprints of like older Marvel comics.
Definitely,
growing up, and I still do occasionally. I think Panini now publishes the Marvel reprints, so that kind of probably started with old Thomas Volney there. Also printed some of the early Robert E. Howard Conan books, The Coming of Conan and things like that. So sort of brought that kind of... epic, pulpy kind of fantasy to the UK as well. So some interesting things. And after the war, a lot more titles came out. OK Comics, Wags, Black Hawk, the Buffalo Bill comics, I think, were quite highly regarded.
All right.
Swift Morgan, I was
Swift
particularly
Morgan,
attracted to.
yeah.
I thought that sounds like a good title.
Good nickname.
Definitely a good one to go for. So, yeah, some really interesting stuff, and all the way from World War II right until... I mean, actually, the comics by this stage, I think they were actually winding down, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Other people had jumped on the bandwagon. Maybe that first golden age of comics had sort of passed, and it was before the second comics boom with Marvel that was just starting in the States at the time. So the comics line wound down in 1961, but they carried on publishing the books up to 67.
Ah, excellent stuff. So that was who was the first people bringing the 87th Precinct books over. And so we were getting them a couple of years later in not necessarily in the right order, I don't think, or possibly they were being published in sort of tranches together. I found a couple of contemporary reviews. I've got a source in the way of looking into the New York Times archive, which is great because it finds lots of stuff. This book was recommended for a summer thriller and a Christmas chiller.
Serves either purpose very
And the review by Anthony Boucher in the Criminals at Large column.
Criminals at Large, wow.
It says, if it is possible, Ed McBain's telling of the cases of the 87th Precinct seems to get even better, even richer in its small details of police work, of the private lives of detectives and suspects, of the colour of the anonymous but Manhattan-like city. Give the boys a great big hand, $2.95. Starts with a grisly discovery, see the title, in an abandoned airline bag, and goes on to a number of lively plots and subplots which make it one of the best in this best of current series. Makes it one of the best in this best of current series.
I see what he's getting at, but it's rather clumsy, isn't it?
Yeah. And it says, don't miss the reprint of Another Beauty, Till Death. So, it was well received by Anthony Boucher,
Marvellous.
who reviewed these things like that. And I must say, I keep saying this almost every time we do a podcast, but it's another book where he sets out the stall in a particular way and moves the series forward again. However, having said that, I reckon this is the start of there being quite a few that are really tonally like this. And it's a great period. I love the books in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so what do you guys think of it?
Yeah, I think that chap's correct. It somehow does seem a bit more detailed. I don't know, it reads quite modern, I thought, when rereading it again. You can't quite believe it's 1960. And it does seem, as though he's pushed things on from even books that he must have written just literally months before this. I mean,
as ever, there's some period detail that does kind of root it in its time, but I think with the overall style, definitely it is pretty great. It could fit with any kind of police procedural of any era, really. It's kind of got some of the classic kind of plot traits that like total random coincidence that kind of sets them on the right track, really, like a long shot, and they kind of just...
But not too unbelievable.
No, they kind of like just in the dark for the most, and them chasing one crime finds another along the way.
Red herrings, like strands that don't lead anywhere, a much more realistic kind of investigation of a crime rather than something that just all the loose ends wrap up very neatly into a single conclusion, which is sort of, I think, what the TV adaptation that we also watched tries to make happen, really, rather more. They did seem to... obviously, I've forgotten the guy's name who was writing for the TV version. Seemed to obviously think, oh, he's got all these different strands, and it's not very neat. Let's just tidy that up for him.
Yeah, so he keeps them going in the TV right until the end, doesn't he? Whereas,
he gets characters involved.
they just once you realise in this that a particular suspect's actually got nothing really to do with it, it's kind of
as would happen in an actual investigation, which I'm sure is the point.
Excellent.
It opens on a rainy March day with a description of the city as being a sort of monochromatic, unrelenting grey, and our patrolman friend Richard Gennaro, who we've seen a couple of books back, does his same trick of nipping into Max Cohen, the tailor's shop, so he can get some free wine before coming across a bag left at a bus stop by someone who gets on a bus. And when he appears inside it, the credits roll. Dun, 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 dun.
Big hand.
It's absolutely brilliant because there's a real sense of horror you can just get straight from the off. You get that it's almost like got a horror element to this book, certainly at the start and very much so at the end. He uses the word terror and revulsion, and you don't even know what's happened at this point. But he reeled in terror and revulsion, and I'm trying to remember why. There's a reference to God not again. And I can't remember what it was that he came across. Oh, I tell you what it is. I know what it is. We haven't seen Dick Gennaro since The Pusher, so really early on, and he was the guy who found the corpse.
The hanging.
Yeah.
So
in the basement. That's right.
It's clearly playing on his mind because it's mentioned a couple of times in this book. That's where it was
That's
going.
the one.
I just couldn't remember.
And he acts a bit incompetently, doesn't he? But he can perhaps put that down to his intake of booze, making him not think quite as clearly as he should, which he manages to keep from coming out, doesn't he?
Just about.
He gets bawled out about it by Captain Frick as well, doesn't he? Who he's a bit unfair, really.
I do like when
It is
Captain
rather.
Frick makes an appearance.
Yeah, can't imagine Captain Frick himself would have actually handled things any better, to be honest.
No.
But there we go.
Good old Captain Frick.
Captain Frick says, "Boy, there are times when I wish I was a movie star or something." It's like, yeah, what? Because you just sat behind your desk shouting at people. Miserable sod.
And then there's a few. Then there's the usual chapters about the lab people.
Yes, and it's very detailed, this one.
Some good
there's
stuff.
the police procedural stuff in this, which very often is writ large in the medical procedures and the coroner procedures, is really detailed, as Blaney has to try, and it goes into so much detail. It's almost a joke in itself. So much detail about how you can work out stuff from fingerprints, from palm length or whatever it is, and bone length, and you can extract all this data, except you can't.
Except you can't for this one. Yeah, it's quite funny that. So he kind of spends pages explaining, then but you can't do that for this hand because it doesn't have any fingerprints and it's not a big enough bone or whatnot.
Yeah, which is great.
But the other big clue other than the hand is the bag that it's in, isn't it?
It is,
like
yeah.
an
It
airline
turns
bag.
up in a Circle Airlines giveaway bag, the sort of thing you used to get in if you travelled first or business class. But clearly giving away to thousands of people, this airline company.
Yeah. So we hope for a bit that the bag might be a lead until obviously talking to I've forgotten his name, Nelson Piat, who breaks the news that it's given away to every first class passenger. But it also is quite hopeful that somehow it can be turned into some kind of promotional thing for his operation.
Yeah. Now, that was something that was different in the TV version, wasn't it? In the TV version we watched, when he went to interview the guy from the airline, he was like, keep us out of the papers. We don't want any photos.
Total opposite, yeah.
In fact, it's the exact opposite. Although, the weird thing with the TV version was, the guy was a bit friendly towards Corella, I thought. It was a bit like, there was like some weird undertone, like he was trying to convince Corella to go for a drink with him.
There were some peculiar performances altogether in that episode, to be fair.
There were some exceptionally weird performances in the TV version.
But the guy in the actual book is great. He's constantly thinking of how he can further the profile of Circle Airlines, which I do quite enjoy. He's very impressed with the photograph that the police have taken of the bag, and is quite keen that it could go in the newspaper.
Yes. He's very opportunistic.
Hell, you can't buy that kind of advertising space now, can you? Very good for our operation.
It's remarkable. Yeah, I love these sorts of characters that McBain creates and populates the world with, and there's a few in the book. In this book, some good bad characters, as like the woman whose son's missing that they go around to try and follow up as a lead, and she's just in it for what they call the relief checks.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they called it on the TV episode. I don't know whether it's here. So she had to report him missing, but she doesn't really care, and she's basically getting high with someone and being quite cross about being interrupted by the police.
Yeah, and then there's a bit of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah. But red herring again.
Mm-hmm.
Or
is it? Yeah.
But there's a good sequence with some other aspects of the police, which is the guys who run the records office, the missing persons office. And they turn up to give Kling a bit of shtick as he turns up to look for basically try and find all the records of missing people who could be best described as male and between the ages of 18 and 34, which is a job enough in itself.
Possibly had big hands.
And possibly had big hands,
Yeah.
yes.
Bartoldi and Romeo, that's right.
Yes, Bartoldi and,
This is his first name. isn't
Romeo
it?
Bartoldi's
Romeo
is-
Bartoldi and then...
and Mike Ambrose, I
Mike
think is the other one.
Ambrose, that's right, yeah. They've got a good line in
Are they in any other books? I can't
yeah,
remember.
we've seen them before. They were in...
Anyhow, yes.
I forgot to cross-reference this as well. So. But we have seen them before.
We've seen them. What's the one with? No, it'll come back to me.
Yeah. We're letting ourselves down on our
Yeah.
our extensive knowledge there. But yeah, he likes his comedy pairings, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
His Laurel and Hardy characters, the ones that bounce off each other, and these two are a good example of that.
Yeah.
Not quite Monaghan and Monroe, not quite that sort of dismissive.
Yeah, they're rather more genial, aren't they? They're a cheery pair, really, and quite fun.
But they take the mickey out of Kling when he turns up.
Of course.
The sun god of the 87th, the blonde wonder himself. But by this point, Kling's pretty much used to it, so he can take it.
Yeah, he was a new, very much a new detective the first time he goes to see him, I think, isn't he? And
Yeah.
he really doesn't know how to take it. I think gets quite flustered. It's possibly the second appearance of Cotton Hawes. That one I'm trying to think. It's one of the ones that's called Killers something.
Yes, indeed.
Where they get out to the outskirts of the city. And
Oh, with the ski guy, the guy where
Yes.
Cy Kramer gets gunned down.
that's the one.
Killer's
Choice?
Payoff.
No. Killer's
Killer's
Payoff.
Payoff. That's the one. That's where we've seen him before. I would.
With the old guy with the shaky hands.
I'd stake my reputation on it.
Well,
Would you?
Well, there we go.
Well, you'd be wrong, because it's the con man.
Damn it.
I found it.
There goes my reputation.
No reputations left round here. Hey-ho. Anyway, but it proves the point. We have seen them before, and they were similarly daft. Oh, the big dafties. But Kling really doesn't have much to do in this book after that, because what he does is he goes to the Missing Persons Bureau, finds some stuff to look up, organises with Steve Carella to swap some days off, and then basically just goes to bed with Claire Townsend for the entire weekend, so we don't see him until the end of the book.
Yeah.
Once it's all over.
Well, the weather hasn't been agreeing with him with his inability to find a hat that suits him, so it's probably for the best that he stays indoors, isn't it?
Yeah, well, who can blame him? But yeah, so that's the one way of getting a character out of the way is by just sending him to bed with his girlfriend for the entire weekend.
Indeed.
So
Yeah, it's pretty much just Carella and Hawes, isn't it, for the rest?
it is.
Get our first early glimpse of Frankie Hernandez, don't we?
Yes, so he's
mentioned for
coming
the
into
first
it.
time, I think.
More and more he's coming in. In fact, there's a very good chapter with Hernandez, which is part of McBain's exploring the city via its peoples and the different cultural mix. And I've got my little tab here, and I've said Hernandez and Parker, and it's about race, because Hernandez's struggle as a Puerto Rican is he's become symbolic, and he feels the weight of being like a symbol for all of the island and having to, people see him as being representative of all of the Puerto Ricans. He's there for the cause, and he sort of accepts that, but also finds it a bit of a weight. And then you get a cop like Andy Parker, who is representative of nothing but bad manners, and he just takes the mickey out of him all the time, and does that thing that casual racists do, which is just assume that you're from somewhere. You're always from somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's a classic racist's move, isn't
Yeah.
it? Where you come from, and you go like, what? Balham,
Yeah.
Middlesbrough, wherever. Hernandez is from the city, but Parker's like...
Not in Parker's mind, he's not. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a really interesting chapter. So
It
that's
is.
and that's a
It's a fairly rare occasion where Steve Carell loses a bit of his normally flawless self-control too.
because he just can't be arsed with Andy Parker's bad attitude.
So he, punches him.
It's clearly a very stressful case, and Parker is a prat.
He
To
is.
say the least.
He is indeed. But that's quite late on, that, isn't it? I think
It is quite late on. It is.
the older. Yeah, I think the strain of the investigation not really going anywhere has got to him at that stage.
Yeah, they do run into a lot of seeming dead ends, don't they? So
They do, and then it all kind of comes together somewhat.
But add into the mix for this one the idea that one of the missing people they're trying to pursue, or they discover as a missing person, is a stripper called Bubbles. Call me Bubbles.
who I think Kling only discovers because of the guys who are enjoying a joke at his expense in the missing persons department.
Yeah.
The records, rather.
So we've been hinted at that she might be important early on. And it turns out she's missing, which means as well that we get to introduce a load more musician characters, which McBain loves to do,
It's really cool.
including a trombone player who tries to steal some drums.
Yeah, Hophead is a.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, Hophead slush pump player.
Yeah, it doesn't use the phrase slush pump in here. I can't believe it.
Outrageous.
I don't think. I have a feeling we're never going to read the phrase slush pump in any more of these books, and I think that's sad.
That is sad. It could have become a major catchphrase.
Yeah.
Hophead with a slush pump.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of the. I don't want to say it's the 1960s character creeping in, because obviously a lot of what people think about the 1960s is spun off from 1967. You know, sort of say 1964 to 1967 is the period people really think is the 60s in terms of how they portray it. But there is a bit of coolness coming into this, a bit of post 1950s austerity maybe, and there's a chapter where they go to try and trace some clothes that they found, because some clothes are abandoned, and they have to go to the shop to ask the guy.
Urban and Suburban. whatever
Urban
it's called.
Suburban.
Urban Suburban, that's the one, yeah.
That's where we all do our shopping. Urban Suburban.
Yeah, I don't much like the changing room arrangement, but
This is brilliant, and this is one of the ways you can make a story like this, which is quite horrible, really funny, is by having these moments. Because they've gone to try and find out if this guy's got any records of who bought these clothes, which you could obviously find because they've got the label in. And when he takes him back to look at the records room is also the changing room. And there's just a fella in there while he's talking about murder. Corella's talking about murder to this guy, or Hawes, or whoever it is. Oh, it's Corella, isn't it? And this guy's just going, "Can I have that other pair of trousers, please?" He's just taking his trousers off in the background. Having a lovely time.
just like conversing with Steve about how he doesn't like his trousers to be too tight, and just has to keep breaking off and discussing the murder to
Yeah, it's great. I love that sequence. Urban Suburban Clothes was one of those tiny shops which are sandwiched in between two larger shops, and which would be missed entirely were it not for the colourful array of offbeat clothes in the narrow window. And it is a small shop, and we find out that Corella gets claustrophobic, because he says he almost had an attack of claustrophobia, which he had to control. And he goes into this shop, and he squeezed past two men who were passing out cold over the off-orange tint of a sports shirt which had no buttons. I ran out of breath saying that then. I got a bit excited myself. I almost passed out. "Excuse me," he said, "excuse me," and he executed an off-tackle run around a group of men who were huddled at the tie rack. The ties, apparently, were made of Indian madras in colours the men were declaring to be simultaneously cool, wild, and crazy. Corella felt hot, tamed, and very sane.
I also enjoy the description of Jerome Gerald, the proprietor, as well.
Yeah, he's in the tradition, isn't he, of these characters?
Absolutely, a thin man with a Fu Manchu beard, wearing a tight brown suit over a yellow waistcoat, and leering like a sex maniac in a nudist camp.
It's an image,
Sure
and I'm very
is.
sad that we didn't get to see him in the TV
I know.
adaptation.
Missed opportunities.
It's great, and he's trying very hard to not help because he's got a very busy shop. Corella has to sort of try and coax him into helping by saying, "It's a murder." And he's going, "What's that stain on there?" And he's like, "Well, that's blood." He's like, "Whoa, right, blood, what? What, blood?" He more or less remembers the person who bought it because it was a very big suit, and is able to find the slip while the man's putting on his trousers in the background. So I don't know how realistic that is, really, that someone would remember it, but maybe if it's bespoke clothing, maybe it was more of a thing. But that's the big comedy scene, I think, in this one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, there are a couple of others as well. There's some good.
Him dealing with the person from the telephone company is a similar kind of difficulty of getting him to help out as well and trace the number, or
That's-
give him the number of the listing of the number.
That's an 87th Precinct trope as well, isn't it? More
Absolutely,
and more
yeah.
is Corella just trying to get the flipping phone company just to tell him something.
And keep accidentally referring to the person he's speaking to as an operator. And it's like, supervisor.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a few more of those coming. But we haven't mentioned is the character of Charles Tudor.
Oh, yes.
Charlie Tudor. He's not called Charlie. They don't call him that. I don't think he's the sort of person who'd want to be called.
Charles
Charlie.
Tudor. Yeah.
And
Bit
he's-
of a weirdo.
One might say.
I mean, should we really talk about what happens at the end? Is there strange noises going on?
I don't know, I just thought I heard quite a strange noise.
Or maybe there was a strange noise going on.
I'm not sure.
Maybe it was the springs on your microphone stand doing
I think they were.
something strange.
I mean, do we want to talk about...
I mean, the ending of the book's quite grisly, but not in a, gunfight or punch-up type way. It's more in the style of a horror story. And actually mentioning Psycho before, like we were saying, and thinking about when that came out, maybe that perhaps was in the air a little bit in terms of the things that were coming out in popular literature and adaptations. Because Psycho was obviously a big adaptation by a big director.
Yeah.
And that would have been promoted in the run-up for probably a couple of years. In the run-up
Certainly.
to that.
Yeah.
And so that would have perhaps had an influence. I don't know. We know that Evan Hunter later worked with Hitchcock on the Birds script and Marnie before they parted ways. So you've got a character who's very posh. He runs a talent agency that provides, well, strippers basically. He thinks he's a choreographer. He thinks he portrays himself as a talent agent, but actually it's just strippers going for jobs
Definitely.
or models.
He likes to envisage himself as something a lot grander than he actually is. I think is.
Doesn't he
fair
put
to
on
say.
like an English accent or something? He says he's got a bizarre, weird accent, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be a bit like he's putting on airs and graces, isn't
Yeah.
he? And he's based in the 87th Precinct equivalent of Tin Pan Alley, isn't he? Or would it be the Brill Building in the real world?
Yeah, it sounds very much like it. The rooms with pianos and aspiring starlets singing, and
So he's got his company in there,
absolutely.
as well as his other flat that he uses for certain purposes. He does like making sure that... Oh, it's really difficult to talk about now. This is daft, this.
See, he reports the missing person as well, doesn't he?
He does. And one thing that you could say now is that
Which isn't really explained.
he's
I
more...
think.
He is a psycho, basically. But he's a psycho more in the sense of someone who is ill.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's that he's flipped because of something or the event has made him the thing that he does, has made him the way he is,
Yeah.
or whether he's always been a bit strange, we don't know.
Yeah.
But certainly nowadays, if a character like that was written, it'd be a lot of psychoanalysis going on about them, wouldn't it? And reasons for
Definitely.
this, that, and the other, which you don't get time to do in a McBain book. So you do get a nice grisly ending, and you get a very strange final interview with him.
Yeah. He seems to, on one level, be aware of actual reality, but on another level, completely deluded about everything. So
Because he says something like, "Is this going to take long?"
Yeah,
yeah.
Like, probably.
it's going to take a very long time.
So yeah, it's a strange ending, really.
But this, as I said at the top of the show, is one of these ones where really I think McBain's starting to get it totally right. He set the pattern with these sorts of stories for how the next few books are going to be. Although he does obviously get a chance to, in the next book, to do something interesting again that has an implication for the future of the series. But books like this, I remember getting this and a few around the time that I read this and thinking, oh yes, I can see that this is a series now, because you've come to expect this sort of beginning, this sort of middle, this sort of end, these sorts of characters. And that doesn't make it formulaic, but makes it reliable and readable, and you understand how it works and why it is the procedural series that it is.
Yeah, I mean, he's really settled into the idea of it as a long-term prospect, I think, by this stage, rather than just... It's not just a matter of oh, well, we've got through those first few and people want more, so let's keep trying out a few different things. He's kind of settling in for the long haul, isn't he, I think?
But rereading it, I couldn't remember who'd done it. I could remember the characters, and I was just, you're kind of like, oh, was this the person that did it or not? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was,
So,
it was
nice.
yeah.
It stands up to being reread.
Well, that's what I think is so great about these books. It really is that you can go away from them, you can come back to them, you can forget, you can read loads in a go, pick up one, and so you might not retain every detail of it, but who cares? It means it's really, really enjoyable when you reread them.
Absolutely.
You get characters like Mrs. Livingston, who is the aforementioned mother of the missing boy, who, when they try to take her out to the station because she's being, well, they find the drugs there, don't they? And she refuses to sort of get dressed. Mrs. Livingston seized her left breast with her left hand. She aimed it like a pistol at Corella, squeezed it briefly and angrily, and shouted, "In your eye, cop!" So, yeah. She's a character.
She's entertaining. I also quite like her new recent boyfriend Lenny, who's found kind of sort of most of the way out the window and over the fire escape, isn't he? When they enter the apartment.
Yeah, making himself look more guilty than he actually is.
Yeah. Although he does then accidentally confess to a number of felonies. Yeah.
Excellent stuff.
Silly Billy.
Right, so have we got any other particular points we need to make about this story?
No, I think we've pitched it quite well in terms of not blowing the entire plot.
I know, it
once.
It is difficult, and you do assume that perhaps people who are listening to this might have an idea, but if you're doing a reread or you've not read all of them, we don't want to... Oh no, it's so difficult. I'm making a face thinking about it. Really. So... Anyway, that is Give the Boys a Great Big Hand by Ed McBain from 1960. We need to come up with a rating for it. We need to fire up Kenneth.
We do.
We need to hope that Jeff Lynne has not plugged in and overtaken Kenneth's workings.
He might have revised all the scores with the help from the Overlords.
The robotic Overlords. So I'm going to go Stevo first to come up with his
We
rating.
got the previous scores, which I always like to have to hand.
Had a record high last time, didn't we?
I can pitch it correctly.
Let me.
Because I think I mustered that we might have to go above 100 in order to at certain times,
Yeah, I mean we were awarding it out of 100 police shields. We didn't
We'll
know how it was going to.
We'll carry on. We'll carry on.
How it was going to play. I'm just going to find the scores for you by going to www. Full stop.
Kenneth.
Hark87podcast.blogspot.com, which is a good website. What I made, because it has got on it the useful resource of the
scoring graph.
Kenneth, should you wish to revise Kenneth's scores, but it's also got the 87th Precinct book list in correct order with as many dates as I can find. I'm going to try and find publication date. It's actually quite hard to find a publication date. Publication year, easy. Copyright date, easy. Publication date, quite hard. So when I've found it, I'll try and add that on there as well.
Smashing.
What I'm trying to do is look it up now on this iPad I have in front of me, which is really slow and quite old now. So it's having a little think about everything that's going on. But I always use my own website as a resource because, it's just there. But that's where you can find links to the episodes, links to the books. The list also tells you about the adaptations that there's been of these different things.
Crikey.
So I will...
Sounds like a treasure trove.
It's the
of
place to
information.
go
really does.
for the 87th Precinct fan. Right, so...
For a monthly fee.
For a monthly fee, I'll ring you up and tell you about it.
Read the books, dear.
Personalised audiobook service.
Was chapter 1. It was raining.
So, let me very quickly run through the scores previously. I'm going to pick this up and move it closer to my eyes. That's how I see it, you see. Cop Hater 86, The Mugger 76, The Pusher 75, The Conman 83, Killer's Choice 71, Killer's Payoff 80, Lady Killer 83, Killer's Wedge 82, Till Death 69, King's Ransom 89.
Oof.
So we've had
89.
the lowest to the highest for the last 2 books.
Well, did you say you coming to me first?
I'm coming to you first. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of my favourites to date. And so without much faffing around, I think I shall say 85.
85 police shields from Stevo. Morgan.
I enjoyed it very much. It's a very solid entry. Not like a top total favourite, but there's nothing to dislike about it at all. I do enjoy it. I'm going to give it a very solid 80 police shields.
80 from Morgan. And that means that I have to come up with my one. I am going to join Stevo in the 85 club, which is where a club we have where we meet up and award 85 police shields to books that we've reviewed.
I'm not allowed to enter.
No, not the way you're going. You're blackballed from the 85 club. But I agree entirely with this. It's really, really solid. It's a lot of fun. It's not got an absolute sizzle to it. That's the word I was looking for. Some of them, you get to a point and it's just like, well, this is intense. It's not got the intensity, but that's sometimes the nature of the police work.
That's it. They're not always going to have the same sort of atmosphere. Sometimes it's kind of really frenetic and there's loads of action, and it's sometimes it's just loads of sort of edge of the seat tension. Sometimes it's a bit more of just the procedure and plodding through the case, but they're all great in their own way, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Because it's kind of a book where you never really witness the crime, do you? It's all about the after effect of just this kind of 1 or 2 happenings, isn't it? And so they're just pursuing that, whereas some of the like you said, the frenetic ones, that they're in the middle of all this chaos that's happening at the same time as they're trying to.
There might be a crime they're trying to prevent. Or,
So, with Kenneth, he was in the background chuntering away, doing his calculations, cogs whirring, steam coming out. He was planning the trajectory required for dropping a steam engine onto a battleship. At the same time, he can multitask.
Yep.
We might need that data.
We might.
I'm just saying, when everything goes, when the balloon goes up soon enough, we may need to be able to provide that information, and Kenneth will help, and we can do a song about it as well. But he says that the book has gained a score of 83 police shields.
Well, there we go.
Well deserved.
I think that sounds about right for me.
Yep.
Excellent.
Right, well, before we finish up, I would like to direct the listening audience to, if they've not read it already, an article I wrote for the website We Are Cult, who featured us as a podcast of the week a few months ago, and I did a follow-up basically about why we're doing this and a bit about the background of the world of McBain, the 87th Precinct, put it into context. So if you've not read it, that's on We Are Cult, which is a great website with lots of movie reviews, music reviews, book reviews, podcasts, stuff to do with comedy. So go there and have a look at that and read the article. We had a couple of comments on it so far, which is great. So there's something to look at. The next book we will be looking at is called The Heckler from 1960. And this is going to be another interesting one. Once again, here's me saying we're settling into the series. There's going to be something new in this one that's not been in any of the past books, and it is going to have implications for the future of the series, or certainly some entries into the series. And we'll do a little bonus episode in a minute, where we'll no doubt smell some books again, as usual.
Good. Which makes great listening.
And you know what? I've even got a surprise to launch onto Stevo and Morgan. Like that.
Ooh.
Jesus.
So they don't know what that is. So you'll have to listen to the bonus episode to find out what happens.
I'm a little bit unnerved now.
And so, well, so you should be, and so you will be. Until then, we're going to sign off. So this is me saying goodbye, and they'll say goodbye from Stevo.
Goodbye.
And Morgan.
Fairly well.
See you soon. Bye.